be talking about how to put pieces together that you've been working on, in this instance applique pieces, into a quilt. So this is not having a pattern and not from a kit, which is much easier. This I took as a class some years back, and it's very simple design. Beginning applique. Worked on putting some borders on it, some mitered edges, and it was pretty fun, so I did another one. This was the second pattern that she included in the class, but I also did a couple more just for the fun of it. So now I've got 4 butterflies, so kind of moved on to something else and did this bird design, and I did a mirror image and created the other half. At this point I was kind of figuring I was going to do something with it eventually. But I needed a centerpiece, so this is what I chose. It's more of an intermediate design. The basket was relatively complicated to put together. Lots more smaller pieces, as you can see, as these other others. Did some embellishment, that was fun. Some embroidery stitches around the edges. So now I'm thinking I'm going to come up with a design to put these together. So that's when I went to the internet, found this piece as my inspiration. So this is going to be my center. I can put my butterflies here, modify the sides, as you can see where I'm going with this for the birds. You have to measure your longest piece, your largest piece that you're going to be using, and this was 20 inches. So I had to make sure that the sides matched in that length, so I had to add a couple of boutiques at this point. These are going to be my side pieces, my sashing, background, and backing. So after I completed the centerpiece, I knew I had to make a couple more pieces to finish out what I would need for a quilt. So we're going to incorporate these last 2 pieces, and this is going to be the center, top, and the bottom. Haven't decided which is which, but we'll figure that out when we get there. So I think the next phase in designing your own pattern, after your inspiration piece, after you know your sizes, because you're going to need to cut down and reduce for them all to be the same. So start with your centerpiece, or your largest piece, which is usually your centerpiece, and make sure that you have accurate dimensions when it's going to be cut down. Okay, so I've cut this. This is a final cut. Couple things when I do this: if I have an underline, I know that that is my final. I don't have to go back and check and say, well, was I estimating, was that my 1/4 of a seam allowance taken out, whatever. Underline, that's cut. Okay, so I have to make my 2 other pieces for the top and the bottom. Since I know the width is 19.5 in this instance, my 2 other top and bottom pieces will have to be 19 by 15. Okay, my other pieces, I know I've measured them, are 15.5 by 15.5. So once you know your dimensions, you can work it up. You can see how much fabric you have. A lot of times you won't possibly have enough. For example, I wanted this fabric for these small insert pieces. I figured out how much I had, and I divided it by, I thought at first I wanted 5.5-inch borders, but I didn't have enough fabric. So this is a great time to figure all of your cuts, all of your measurements, how much fabric you have. If you need any more, this is the time that you need to figure it out. So I'm working on redoing my dimensions of my blocks since I don't have enough material for these side pieces. I had originally thought 5.5, but I have 23 inches width divided by 5.5 inches gives me only 4 lengths of 60, and my length is around 70, so that's not going to be enough. And I think that after looking at it, 5.5 inches is going to be pretty wide anyway. So I'm going to cut it down to 4.5. That's cut. So if I have 23 inches divided by 4.5, that gives me 5 lengths of 4.5 inch strips. I'm talking about in right here, and that'll be plenty. And I think that'll be a nice 4.5 inches. You just kind of have to play around with what you like, but those are the inserts on the side, and I think that'll be enough. So what I need to do now is go ahead, and I've changed the dimensions on this side. I was deciding how tall they're going to be, but I'm going to keep them a square. So I'm changing all of these to 4.5 times 4.5. It changes my dimensions a little bit, but not significantly. So that's final. I draw the line underneath it. That's my final cut. So my length here is 15.5 times 4.5. Final. My centerpiece was here, 20 by 4.5. Okay, so you can get the hang of it here. Change this here. Now, one other thing that I wanted to point out, there we go, final cut, is when you're making your own pattern, it's very important to be consistent. So, for example, this is my length of this row, these pieces, 20 inches. 20 inches refers to the length. 15.5 is my width of that piece. So, if you're consistent on how you write the dimensions, it's less confusing down the line. Did I mean you just be consistent? And again, if you use the underline for cut, that's what your cut is going to be. Now, you've noticed here that I've circled some. That is my way of saying that is what, after my seam allowances of 1/4 inch. So 20 inches cut, but it's going to be 19.5, that piece, when it's finally sewn in. Now, 15.5 inches width, you're going to take your seam allowances of 1/4 inch. So here I've got 15 inches and I've circled it. That to me means that is my final length width of that piece, so that I can add up my different individual pieces so I can figure out my width and my length, and then I know how much fabric to buy for my backing. And also you need to know for sashing, for binding, so you do need to figure out this length. So here's a tip on making your own pattern. When you get to a point that you're pretty well comfortable with what you're going to be doing, make your squares, make your blocks with ink, your dimensions in pencil. That way, if you can erase them without erasing all of your lines in case you need to make adjustments.